I have seen the world across the waters. Sophia, I'm coming back to your door. And from this moment you can see the future. And from this moment know what came before. My life is full of loving, full of people. But me, I find my love in just one face. Sophia says to fly into blue sky, and she will stay at home. Be at home, she says, darling, while you're gone, I will hold the place. I have found a field of lovely flowers, but only one blossom holds my gaze. The silent starry horse rides the night sky, and every star in heaven takes her shade. Sophia gives her light to so many people, and each can see her light in just one face. Sophia, fly into blue sky, and I will stay at home. Be at home, I said, darling, while you're gone, I will hold the place. I said, now, darling, while you're gone, I will hold the place.
Hello, my name is Aaron Gilmartin, and I'm going to be showing you some of the key techniques to playing bossa nova guitar. Bossa nova is a style of music that came out of a mixture of samba, which is a style of music from the northeast of Brazil, and is a very highly syncopated and exciting rhythm. And that style then mixed with the American jazz harmony in the 40s and 50s in Brazil, and they came up with bossa nova. I'm going to be showing you a bunch of very small pieces of technique that you can use immediately to start to sound like a bossa nova guitarist and to play bossa nova guitar, both as a solo thing as well as backing up vocalists. Singers are a big part of bossa nova, and almost all of bossa nova music is vocal music. So most of what I will be talking about will be in reference to backing up or accompanying a singer, but the guitar parts are very compelling, and so therefore can be used to play solo guitar as well without the vocalist or the singer present or the song. So a little bit of history about bossa nova. It began in the 1950s in Rio de Janeiro with people like Antonio Carlos Jobim, and although Tom Jobim or Antonio Carlos Jobim, he's known by both names, although he's the most well-known and I think probably the most prolific of the writers who became successful, there were a lot of other influences in the music that came about through people who were just interpreters of bossa nova and of samba, previously, and also people who were guitarists and instrumentalists, mainly guitarists, but also piano players, other things as well, certainly percussion. And so bossa nova was a kind of a condensing of what samba had been before. So it's a quieter sound than what samba is. It's kind of a very soft, romantic sound, and you saw that in the song that I just played. The vocal style is very relaxed, and it's very it's not a full voice kind of singing usually. And the guitar also is what I think of as sort of an airy or a watery quality, a floating quality that you get from the guitar. And although bossa nova is using these very exciting rhythms underneath it, it's played in such a way as to kind of give you a sense of just peace and floating while syncopation is going on in the rhythm. So I guess I want to mention a couple of people who were influential in the beginning of bossa nova so that you have a feeling that you can begin to understand the roots and the history of what bossa nova is. And everyone sort of knows Tom Jobim or Antonio Carlos Jobim, but then Vinicius de Moraes is a guy, Vinicius de Moraes in English, is a poet. He was a poet who wrote a bunch of lyrics for a guitarist named Baden-Powell, and also for Carlos Jobim and for other people. Vinicius wrote lyrics for many people. And I think you should also know the name Baden-Powell, who was also a composer of some of the core melodies or guitar parts, definitely songs of the bossa nova era. And he was mainly a guitarist, though a composer as well, and gave concerts as a solo player, but also accompanied other people. So if you want to go into that area and sort of follow the tradition of more solo playing and the highly developed bossa nova style, you might go after Baden-Powell. So the Brazilian guitar music is played on a nylon string guitar usually. And I want to encourage those of you who don't have a nylon string guitar to go ahead and work on the steel string that you're holding, or even an electric guitar, a jazz box, or a solid body guitar, or various kinds of smaller folk guitars, because I've heard wonderful arrangements of these songs, both my own and other people's songs, on those kinds of guitars, and they sound great. But if you want to get that very stereotypical, that really platonic form of the bossa nova sound, you're going to want to get yourself a guitar with some nylon strings on it. And I'll just tell you a few things about the nylon string guitar which differ a little bit from the folk guitar, steel string guitar, or the jazz guitars and rock guitars. Usually the neck is a little wider. That is, it's taller from top to bottom. And that makes it a little bit harder to play. So if you're accustomed to playing a folk guitar with a skinnier neck, you're going to end up developing a little bit different technique, a little bit more strength in your fingers in order to do this. There's a balancing fact, which is the strings are actually a lot easier to depress. That is, they're a lot easier to push down onto the frets. So you're not having to use as much strength to connect with the frets, with the string to the fret. So where you might need a little bit more strength in your hand to reach notes because they're farther apart, because the neck is wider and the frets might be even a little bit longer, the strings are easier to push down. So some people find it easier to play a nylon string guitar. Some people find it a little bit more difficult. I think it's usually easier for people. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that there's a lot less tension in the strings than there is on a steel string guitar. A steel string guitar will use a very high tension bridge, and if you put steel strings on a classical guitar, it usually will just pull the bridge right off the front of the guitar because there's so much tension in the strings. So it's by definition, rather, a lower tension and therefore a lower volume instrument. It's a very soft sound. So I'm going to start off, as I said, showing you some of the basic pieces of bossa nova guitar playing that will allow you to quickly begin to play bossa nova guitar. These pieces, I think you should think of as little tiny little things, little bites that you can learn and build up your bossa nova repertoire of techniques. And in that way, it won't seem daunting to you or overpowering. I'm going to start off with a little excerpt from the song that we just heard, that I just played for you, and talk about the harmonies that bossa nova brings from jazz, borrowed from jazz according to history, and makes it really have its distinctive sound and style. So the first things that I want to talk about are these 4 chords here. We're going to call that G minor 7. We're going to come back to each one. That's G flat 7 sharp 11, F major 7, and F sharp diminished. These chords I play in the beginning of the song in 3-note versions. And there's a couple of reasons that I do that, and I'll get to that in a minute. But let me just say that it's a little bit softer to play 3 notes instead of 4. This G minor 7 chord in the 3-note version looks like this. All 3 fingers are on the 3rd fret, on the 6th, 4th, and 3rd strings, respectively. And the 4-note version, in the 4-note version, I'm usually using a bar with the 3rd finger, which I flatten out across the strings. I sort of break, it's what I call breaking the joint there, by letting this joint relax and play those 3 notes above the G on the 6th string. The way I like to think about chords that I haven't learned before and that I'm learning anew, learning for the first time, is I try and compare them to chords that I know in other places on the guitar, especially chords that I learned in the very beginning of playing guitar. And then I transpose that shape that a chord has offered me from the basic chords that you learn in the beginning of playing guitar. And in this case, this G minor 7 looks an awful lot like an A chord. Just slided up. These 3 notes then are just slided up 1 fret here to the 3rd fret. I happen to be playing them all with this bar here of the 3rd finger, but they are actually, that would be A, and this would be B flat or G minor 7 in this case. So it's an easy way to remember if you're wondering, oh, how did he play that first chord, that G minor 7 chord? Oh yeah, it was the A chord just slided up 1 fret. Okay? In the beginning, I'm fingering it, I think I'm fingering it like this, with 2, 3, 4 in the left hand. So that's my 2nd finger on the 6th string, 3rd on the 4th, and 4th on the 3rd string for the G minor 7. These chords use jazz harmony or extended harmony. They use the upper extensions of the chords. So instead of just using the 1, 3, and 5, or 1st, 3rd, and 5th of a chord, in this case it would be G, B flat, and D, it uses this chord, the G minor 7, uses the 7th, which is the next 3rd above the 5th. And then on top, it has the B flat, which is the 3rd of the chord. So that's 1, the G is the 1 of the chord, the 7, which is the F, and the B flat, which is the 3rd, the flat 3rd. The D is the 4th note on the top when we do play it. The second chord that I want to show you is the G flat 7 sharp 11. Okay? Now this chord seems to be very complex in the way you say it, but I'm going to teach you a couple of ways of seeing it and understanding it very, very quickly and very easily. From the G minor to the G minor 7 to the G flat 7, these 3 fingers, and when you're playing just the 3-note versions of the chords, stay very close together. And that is the 2nd and the 3rd finger move 1 fret, but the 4th one luckily keeps the same note, which makes it very easy to play. And it's one of the things you want to always keep in mind when you're changing from one chord to the next is, are there any notes that are common between the chords? Is there any note that stays the same between the 2 chords that I can keep basically where it is while moving the other fingers? Makes it very easy to learn and to solidify the feeling of the chord underneath your fingers. So from the G minor to the G flat 7 is a pretty easy move there. you want to think maybe about your wrist just relaxing a little bit. It'll be very turned in order to make the G minor 7 nice and turned in that way, and it'll relax just a little bit more. The wrist will become just a little bit more parallel to the floor to allow you to play that chord. The sharp 11 is this C note on top, and that's what we use in the 4-note version of this chord, and it's also important because it's the melody note that I'm singing at that moment, if you want to enforce the melody note, which we're going to talk about later as well. These notes then are G flat, F flat, and B flat on top. And that's the G flat 7 chord. Okay? And then the F chord can be played in a couple different ways. Again, it's just a 3-note chord. What we want to notice again is that from the G minor 7 to the G flat 7, we have just these two fingers moving, and then to get to the F, I bring the first finger up here for a number of reasons. But the main one is that I can then apply this C for the 4-note chord here on the top, which of course you could do this way, but it's not as comfortable. So, from the G flat 7 to the F major 7, there are two fingers that move again and one that holds a common note. The third finger is staying on this F flat, which becomes an E, but in any event, it's the same note in the F major chord. And the fourth finger and slides back, the second lifts up, and the first comes down on the F chord. So I think of that as two notes changing, one being held steady there. Okay? So the first three chords again are G minor 7, G flat 7, and F major 7. The fourth chord is this chord, which is a F sharp diminished chord. And the fourth note would be the C again on top. And what can I say about this chord except for you have the one common tone between the F major 7 and the F sharp diminished chord. And then you have two notes that have changed. The F has come up to 1/2 step on the 6th string to the F sharp. And then the second finger has given way for the first finger to come down here and play on the 4th string, the E flat. A couple of little things to show you about this chord. Number one, when you want to play this 4th note on top, it's best to use the bar of the first finger here. And it bars from the 4th string down, so you can play both the E flat on the C string and the C on the top string. Okay? I want to show you a couple of things to use as memory triggers for how these chords are played. Again, we saw that this G minor 7 looks an awful lot like an A chord slid up one fret there to play the top 3 notes of the G minor 7. The G flat 7 chord looks like a lot of things that you can see in it. I don't know if you know the C chord, this basic C chord here, and the C7 might be a chord that you've seen before. Those two notes here in the C7, this E and B flat, or F flat and B flat, are the same two notes that we have in the G flat chord. And it's important to remember that for the reason that this second chord, when we come from the G minor 7 to the G flat 7, is actually a substitution. And Bossa Nova is very famous for its substitutions. And a substitution is a chord that comes instead of a different chord and provides the same harmonic purpose or the same harmonic function as the other chord. So in general, we might find it more natural or more common to hear after a G minor 7 to hear the C9 chord. But in Bossa Nova, often they will make substitutions, and instead of going from the G minor to the C7, they will go to the G flat. And the reason that I wanted to point that out at this moment was because it does share these very important two tones here. So the C chord, the C7, and the G7 have those two notes. And it's an easy way to remember what the notes are for that chord. The G flat there in the bass and the C7. Share those notes. This chord, this F major 7 chord, looks an awful lot like an A minor chord. You've probably played an A minor chord at some point in your guitar learning, and the F major 7 is just an A minor chord with an F in the bass. So whether we're playing the 3-note version or whether we're playing the 4-note version, we can think about that A minor chord being there, and then just pick with your right hand which strings you want to play, which notes. This chord is the F sharp diminished chord, either the 3-note version or the 4-note version, and it looks an awful lot like a B7. And I think that before you learn an F sharp diminished, you've probably learned a B7 chord. If you're playing anything in E minor, often you play a B7. And that looks an awful lot like this F sharp diminished chord, except for instead of playing the B on the 5th string, you're playing an F sharp on the 6th string. So again, G minor 7, looking like the A. This G flat 7, looking like, a little bit like, the C, which is its substitute chord. The F major 7, looking like an A minor with an F in the bass. And the F sharp diminished chord, which looks an awful lot like a B7. Okay? So, the jazz harmonies, these upper extensions, are what make bossa nova so recognizably different from playing, for instance, country music, or playing folk music on the guitar, where you're just strumming. A lot of people learn first just to strum the guitar and strum some chords. And so if you see on a lead sheet or a piece of paper, a piece of music paper, the chords written G minor, G flat, and F major, and you play something like this, it's going to sound a lot less like bossa nova than if you play. And so we want to begin to, as soon as we are playing a style, when we see the name of a chord, to apply the kinds of harmonies on top of it, or the extensions on top of it, that will make it sound like bossa nova. In order to make it sound that way, I'm going to talk about the way to play these chords now in the right hand, and I'm going to give you a progressively more complex way of approaching the rhythm. Samba, which came before bossa nova historically, was around from the beginning of the 20th century. What is a very syncopated style of music, and syncopation means the breaking up of rhythm so that you don't just feel the downbeats, but you also feel other beats, upbeats, and beats against the downbeat. And when bossa nova came along, although the volume came down a little bit, the syncopation remained. And there are some slow sambas, and there are also many slow bossa novas. It's kind of a medium tempo music in general, though there are some faster bossa novas for sure. The syncopation is very much alive, and there's many ways to make it felt. The first rhythm that I want to show you to play with this involves eighth notes against a quarter note rhythm. And the bass notes in bossa nova are what happens on the quarter notes. So almost every time you're going to be playing 2 quarter notes to the bar. The bossa nova is written generally in 2/4, considered to be a 2/4 music. So there are 2 quarter notes for every bar, and on each quarter note you're going to play a bass note, pretty much religiously. There are a few exceptions to that, and we'll get to that before we're done today. But in general, you want to play 2 quarter notes on in the bass line. So for our 4 chords, that's the way it would sound. Okay? that's going to be the first rhythm that I show you. I'm going to show it to you with two eighth notes in the beginning of the bar, and then a dotted eighth note in the second beat of the bar. So the first beat is going to have 2 eighth notes played with the first and second fingers on the fourth and third strings. And then just after the second bass note, or the second downbeat, the second beat of the bar, we're going to have an upbeat played. And that is generally going to be considered to be held for a dotted eighth note. So in the beginning of the bar, all 3 fingers play at the same time. All 3 fingers, all 3 notes. On the and of 1, these 2 fingers play alone. And then the thumb plays alone on beat 2, just the G note in this case. And then directly after that, on the E of 2, or the first 16th note after beat 2, we play the same 2 notes again. And that's where the syncopation comes in this particular example. So you have a kind of relaxed part of the bar, and then you have a little bit more of an excited part of the bar. And you might want to practice those 2 things by themselves. In fact, I suggest it's the best way to get comfortable with this stuff is to play just the 3 notes together until you really feel that you are making all 3 notes sound at exactly the same time and at the volume that you want. Likewise, the second half of the bar you should practice alone as well. That is the bass note alone, and then the 2 notes on the upbeat. And that's going to sound together like... So, again, the full rhythm is 2 eighth notes in the beginning of the bar, and then a dotted eighth note in the second half of the bar, and 2 quarter notes being played in the bass. And it sounds like this. From that rhythm, we're going to begin to complicate the rhythm just a little bit by adding another 16th note upbeat in the second half of the bar. At the very end of the phrase, before we get back to the beginning of the bar, we're going to add a 16th note upbeat. And that note is going to then make it not necessary to play the first note of the next phrase. That sounds a little bit complicated, but let's listen to this. It sounds like this. And now we have a variation that we can use whenever we want. And basically the kind of bossa nova that you're going to play and your style of bossa nova is going to come down to when you play these variations. Let's learn the second half of the bar, and I will leave the first half of the bar empty, and I'll just practice 2 beats. I'll give you an example of a way to practice just the end of the phrase. We're going to play the end of the phrase, the second beat, fully, and it sounds like this. Okay, what it consists of is 1 bass note on beat 2, followed by an upbeat. That is, immediately afterwards you play the second, the fourth and third strings of the chord, and then before you get to the next quarter note or downbeat with the bass line, you play an upbeat again. So it's a a quarter note followed by an upbeat, and then an upbeat followed by a quarter note. Okay? And I'll start at the beginning of the bar this time. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So what you want to practice are, to break it down into even smaller pieces, is the downbeat followed by a chord, and then the chord followed by a downbeat. And again, you want to just make sure that you can do that every way from Sunday. Chord followed, downbeat followed by a chord, chord followed by a downbeat. As many times as you need to until you feel like it's just very natural to do just that motion. Thumb, fingers, fingers, thumb. Thumb, fingers, fingers, thumb. And once you feel like that's okay, try and put it in rhythm. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Now, that's a very relaxed feeling, right? It's a kind of floating kind of feeling. It's a beautiful sound, but it's not the complete phrase that we're working with here. Our first rhythm was 2/8 notes in the first beat, that is, followed by the second downbeat and then a dotted eighth. Right? So that was our full rhythm. And now what we've done is we've moved that first note back just 1/16 note, so that you have something that sounds like. And as it goes through the chord progression, it sounds like this. I'm going to start off with the downbeat, but then after that, it will always be precluded by its 16th note that comes just before it. Sounds like this. 2/8 notes in the beginning, and then the variation. Starting over. Okay, now, if you can do that, which I'm sure you can, but when you can do that, you are now playing something that everyone will recognize as bossa nova. And the main thing that I haven't spoken about yet, which is making this sound so much more bossa nova than anything that I've done before or explained today, is the syncopation of the chord itself. That is, the chord arrives before the downbeat. So in the first example, I was showing you the chord starting with the downbeat. New chord on the downbeat. 1, 2, 1, 2. But with the variation, we bring in the chord just before the new downbeat. And that's what provides this sense of anticipation or surprise in the music. And once you hear it a number of times, since that surprise is a little bit always there, you begin to float. It begins to have the sense that you're just a little bit always up. So, you want it to sound like that, and the way to do it is to play that chord just before the downbeat. So, I'm going to play it with the chord before the downbeat in every chord this time. And this is what I want you to learn as your variation. I'm going to come in just before beat 1 with an upbeat 16th note. I'll count in with 2 bars of 2, and I'll count all the way through, so you can practice this way. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, chord yet. Okay, so those two variations show you pretty much everything I did on the first song rhythmically. What I tried to do a lot while I was singing was accompany my voice with the least obtrusive kind of accompaniment. And that is the first rhythm that I showed you, the full 2/8 notes in the first beat, followed by just a little bit of syncopation on the second beat. I think I was probably anticipating the chords before the next downbeat sometimes, because it's sort of a natural thing to do, and also because the melody does that. The melody of the song, and of just about every bossa nova, is syncopated before the downbeat. So it's not only syncopated during the bar, but it also precludes the next chord, so that the notes fit the next chord before it actually arrives. And the accompaniment can go along with the melody in that way and cohere both the melody with the accompaniment in that way. It's a very beautiful aspect of bossa nova guitar playing, where often the guitar can play the melody with or some sort of accompanying melody with the sung melody. So I want to show you how to make the rhythm come alive in this phrase, so that you can begin to feel not only like you're playing bossa nova guitar, but that you know exactly what each part of your body is doing to make it happen. The big obstacle to making this feel very smooth while incorporating exciting rhythmic patterns is the left hand movement just before the new chord, so just before the anticipation of the new chord. It's important to pay close attention to the movement of hands, and I went over to in some length the similarities between the different chords, so that you could see the shortest ways to get between the different chords. And although I showed you a few different fingerings, I suggest particular ones that are most simple, the easiest ones for your hands to reproduce. The trick with the rhythm is that you're playing before the downbeat. You're playing the new chord, and so you're changing your hand before sort of your body or the breath of the song is indicating you need to. The way to make this happen really smoothly, so that it feels just like water running over the dam, is you allow yourself to count the beat before the new bar, to subdivide that beat, so that you know exactly where you're changing, and you put the change actually as part of the subdivision into the motion. This requires a whole lot of intricate technical development, and I'm going to talk to you about the different aspects that are going to make that all possible. The first one is damping, muting the strings. In order for you to move your hands, both your left hand and your right hand, you need to be able to stop the sound of the ringing of the previous chord. And this is going to be affected by both hands, and it's going to be affected by the use of both hands. In this case, we're fretting all the strings, so it's that we're playing. All the notes we're playing are fretted notes. They're not open strings. So dampening is that much easier, because just by relaxing your left hand off of the strings, you can stop the note from ringing almost instantaneously. Right? So whenever you want to, without using your right hand at all, you can stop the note. I cheated a little bit on the F chord and played and used my right hand to damp. The right hand is also there to damp and allows you to stop the note also. And I'm using a combination of both in this little passage. And I think you should get into the habit of using both as well, because it allows you to choose which notes to move at what time. So, as I move between the chords, Before I play each chord, I'm putting these fingers down on the strings, which makes it impossible for notes to ring, while I move the left hand. And of course, at that point, the left hand is not fretting the string anymore. It's been relaxed off of the fretboard and is just holding the strings muted with the fingers actually still on the strings. And that allows you to make the move of from chord to chord whenever you want to. After you have a bit of facility with that, you can then choose when the best time to move your hand is. In order to build up some facility with dampening, it's best to isolate either the dampening with the left hand or the dampening with the right hand, and practice the phrase using, or any phrase, and I'm going to suggest that you use the first example to practice with, which is a less complex rhythm, but allows you to not worry about the more complex rhythm and the movement of the left hand, which makes it possible to just practice the dampening, which is going to be necessary in order to make that move, which allows you to play with a really smooth sound. The dampening practice techniques basically mean practicing with staccato notes. So instead of playing, we're going to be playing so that's the same rhythm, but I'm using the right hand to dampen everything. And if I wanted to use the left hand to dampen, it would sound exactly the same actually, or very similar. Now you can hear a difference between those two dampening techniques. With the left hand dampening, the upper part of the body, the part over here by the sound hole, is still vibrating. And so you do have more note still occurring, even though you've stopped the notes from ringing by lifting the fingers off the fretboard. Still, this part of the string is still vibrating a little bit. And if you combine the two, you can get a very quiet sound, a very precise kind of staccato sound. But I suggest that you practice both of those individually. It's something that will take a lot of time, and it's something that I suggest you do very, very slowly. So you'll probably want to put on a metronome, and maybe put the metronome on every 8th note, so that you can practice at a tempo something like this. I played a few different variations there, but you want to practice very slowly in order to feel like your hands are responding to exactly what you want, stopping the notes exactly when you want to, either with your right hand or your left hand. The left hand muting is going to be really important also because you're going to be moving the left hand between chords. So I'm now going to show you how to count the second beat of the bar before the new downbeat, where you can decide on which subdivision of the beat to move your left hand. Okay? The second part of the bar is the one where we were playing. So that's quarter note, upbeat, or thumb, fingers, and then fingers, thumb. The second half of that beat is the new chord. So that is 2, E, and a 1. Now what you'll see is that there's a very quick silence in between those two. Right? I made it a little bit more pronounced now for you. And I also made the movement of the right hand a little bit bigger. And that allows you to see exactly when this is happening. Now you're already maybe seeing the secret to this, but I'm going to break it down further for you by counting out the 4 16th notes of the second beat. 1, E, and a 2. 1 E and a 2. That click is even nice sometimes. 1 E and a 2. So that's how you begin to coordinate the movement and the movements of your hands, the movement of the chord and the movement of the two hands, so that it sounds absolutely smooth between chords. I've now shown you that I've decided to mute the strings entirely with both hands on the and of beat 2. The phrase would then sound like 1 E and a 2 E and a 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 1 and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 and a 2 E and a 1. Okay, so with very slow practice on that, you should be able to add the eighth note in the first beat of the bar so that you can play. I'm now going to play the full phrase, not the 4 chords, but the 2 chords, going between the G minor 7 and the G flat 7, but I'm going to play the full rhythmic phrase, which has the first eighth note in the first beat. And it sounds like this, at the same speed, nice and slow. 1 E and a 2 E and a 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 1. So I'm going to count through the bar twice, 1 E and a 2 E and a, like that. And then I'm going to play through the example 4 times with the syncopations and the muting on the and of 2 while the chord moves on the and of 2 as well. And I want you to play along with me, obviously not the first time perhaps, but learn how to count like this and play along like this, and you will be able to swing in bossa nova. 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and 1 E and a 2 E and a 1. Great. So I want to show you a few places where in the traditional Brazilian repertoire these chords that I've been working with can be applied to songs that everyone knows from the Brazilian repertoire. The first song that I want to talk about is The Girl from Ipanema, and these 2 chords are 2 chords that appear in the song The Girl from Ipanema, coincidentally. The rhythm that you play is kind of up to you. There's various kinds of rhythms that work well behind The Girl from Ipanema, but I'm going to show you a couple of different things which are related to what we've been doing. There are 2 turnarounds in The Girl from Ipanema. The first one happens after the first, I think it's 8 bars, in the middle of the phrase of the first verse, and that involves 4 chords. And I just played them there for you. It's A minor, A flat 7, D flat major 7, and this G flat 7 sharp 11 that we've been working with. As you'll notice, this A minor chord looks an awful lot like our G minor 7. It's an A minor 7 chord here on the 5th fret. Again, all three notes are on the 5th fret together. 6, 4, and 3. Just like on this one, they were all on the 3rd fret together. The second chord, very much like our second chord, is just 1 fret down with the 2nd and 3rd fingers to make the A flat 7. Which looks an awful lot like the 2 first chords of my phrase, which was G minor 7 to G flat 7. The third chord is this chord, which is going to appear in the second song that I work on this DVD with you, which is a D flat major 7. This chord is related to many other chords, but I'm just gonna show you how it's played here by itself, and that is the 2nd and 3rd fingers are on the same fret, on the 4th fret, and then the 1st finger's on the 3rd and the 4th is on the 5th frets. So those two are on the same fret on the 5th and 2nd strings. The 3rd finger is then on the 4th string on the 3rd fret, playing the F, and the C is played by the 4th finger on the 5th fret on the 3rd string. Okay, so as you can see, the 4th finger holds the common tone between the first 3 chords. A minor 7, A flat 7, to D flat 7, D flat major 7. Okay, and you'll see some other similarities there. The 2nd and 3rd finger stay on the 4th fret. They just move down. The 3rd finger moves down 2 strings. The 2nd finger just moves down 1. The 4th finger, of course, is staying on that C note where it was from the very beginning. A minor 7, A flat 7, and then to the D flat major 7, you just move these 2 fingers down and put the 1st finger on the F note on the 4th string. The 4th chord is our G flat 7 sharp 11 that we showed you before. Okay? I'm just going to show you one little rhythmic trick here that is a nice way to play a turnaround. And a turnaround is something that comes at the end of a phrase just before the phrase starts again. And a nice way, a kind of cliched and typical way of doing it in bossa nova, is to play what I showed you with that anticipated notes just before the chord. So you're going to need to change on the and of the beat 2 of the previous beat before the chord, and it's going to sound something like this. Okay? You can use that rhythm almost anywhere as a turnaround rhythm, and it kind of relaxes the harmonic changes a little bit. It makes something a little bit more regular. So where we have our again, I'm using just that anticipation of the chord just before the beat, and you repeat that rhythm for each beat, and you kind of relax the rhythm, and you turn it into a turnaround, meaning that you prepare the listener to begin again. The second turnaround from The Girl from Ipanema that uses the same chords that we're using just uses these 2 chords. It goes between the F major 7 and the G flat 7 sharp 11. It happens to have each chord for two bars. And if we were going to use our little turnaround rhythm, we're going to just use that anticipation. Ga-ga, 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 starting again. And the second part of the verse would then start there. So let me show you a couple of places where you can apply these chords that we've learned to songs that you might have heard. And I'm going to play for you a little chord progression that you can play on both The Girl from Ipanema and on a song called Desafinado. And you can also play it on the beginning of Satin Doll. There's a lot of songs actually that do this. And what you want to remember is a little bit of the chordal relationship, so you can see how songs relate, and then you can use what you've learned here to play other songs. So The Girl from Ipanema, the melody in the beginning, we'll all recognize that melody. And I'm just going to play for you something that I think that you guys will be able to learn very easily from what we've been working on, and you can use for The Girl from Ipanema or for lots of other songs. It's going to be this progression. And now with the turnaround that I taught you before, and I think you will all recognize the song Desafinado as well, which is another classic of the bossa nova repertoire, and it starts off with this melody. And I won't go on. So the same chord progression that we saw from what I just played a moment ago, which works on The Girl from Ipanema, it also works on Desafinado, and it also works on, as I said before, Satin Doll, which is a song that was written by Billy Strayhorn and Duke Ellington before the bossa nova repertoire that we're talking about here. And again, starting on the F, moving to the G7, the G minor. It doesn't actually continue in the same way, going down there, but it is the same chords. I want to show you one other thing about Desafinado, and also many Brazilian songs, is that they use these very interesting upper extensions so that you can get something that sounds more interesting than it would than if you didn't use these upper extensions. And it's at that point in the melody where you hear and right there, what you're listening to there is G7 with a sharp 11 in it, that note on top. So the second chord in some songs will move from the major 7 to the dominant 2, but instead of being the dominant 2 with a natural 5 or a natural 4, it uses that sharp 11. You'll recognize this chord, this G7 sharp 11, as being the second chord from our previous example, just moved up a half step to G. So the chords that you use for these songs are the same ones that we were working with before, and I'm just using a few other extensions or positions of the chord in order to make it more interesting, more stylistically correct, and more consistent, I guess, in this context. So the first chord that I'm playing is the F major 7, which was the third chord in our example. Again, that's the A minor chord with the F in the bass. And the second chord is a G7 chord. And when you see this chord, whenever you hear G7 or G flat 7 or A7, you should think immediately, oh, that's like that other chord, right? It's the second chord from what I just said. It's the second chord from our example. And the only difference is that instead of putting the sharp 11 here on top, as we were on the G flat 7, we were playing that C up here on the second string, I'm now playing the same 3 notes in the bottom, but on top I'm putting the 13. In this case, that's the E chord, the E note on the second string with the 4th finger. Can you see that? These 3 notes are the same as the G flat 7 that we were playing before. Just moved up 1 fret. And then I'm using a bar to get this second note here, this F. Instead of playing it in this way, I'm playing it with a bar. So the first finger is playing both the G and the F, and then the B is being played by the second finger, and I'm using my 4th finger for the E note on top, which is also called the 13. It's one of those extension numbers. As you play up in the chord, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. So again, the first 2 chords sound like. And again, we have that anticipation of the chord, right? 1E and a 2E and a 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 1E and a 2E, 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E. The third chord that I was playing was a G minor. Those are exactly the same notes that I was playing in this more complex way for our first example. And the reason that I was playing it this way for our first example is so that we could move easily to the G flat 7. But this time I'm using just a full bar across the 3rd fret. The first finger is playing all 4 notes, but I'm not playing the 5th string at all. So it's 6, 4, 3, 2. Those are the numbers of the strings. 6, 4, 3, 2, 6, 4, 3, 2, using 3 fingers and the thumb, and then following that with the G flat 7 chord that we'd seen before. So coming from the G13, that's the 2nd chord. The 3rd chord is the G minor 7, and the 4th chord, the G flat 7, sharp 11. So one more time, and with the anticipations happening on the chords. And that's with our turnaround that I showed you before. The last 2 chords here are going to open up in another place that we can look very closely at what Bossa Nova is doing. It's a great place to look at another Bossa Nova cliche, which is the relationship between the 2 and the 5 chord in the scale. These 4 chords that I showed you are F major to G7 or G13 to G minor 7 and G flat 7 sharp 11. I want you to look closely at the relationship between these chords because as you move around, if you start to play a song, for instance, in the key of A, and you know about the relationship between the chords, you can very easily play different songs that use very similar harmonic progressions or harmonies or chords. The ones that use the same chords but they start on a different note. If you know the relationships between the chords, it's much easier for you to play different songs that are in different keys. So the first chord we're going to call the 1 chord. The second one we're going to call the 2 chord because it starts on the note 1 step above the 1 chord. The third one is also a 2, but it's a 2 minor. And the 4th chord is a flat 2-7 chord, right? So it's not the 2, but it's a flat 2, G flat. But this is what I was saying before is the 2-5 relationship. Because, as we spoke about before, this is a substitution. This G flat 7 chord, as I mentioned, is a substitution for the C chord. They use the same internal notes here. So when you think about this progression and you think 1 chord, moving up a whole step to the 2 chord, 2-13 or 2-7, to the 2 minor 7, G minor 7, to the flat 2-7. Then obviously you can move this to, say, the key of A, and you can use the frets as a guide to know how far you're supposed to move. You have your 1 major 7 chord, your 2 7 or 13 chord, your 2 minor 7, and your flat 2 7 sharp 11. Okay, so that's a lot of jazz harmony. That's a lot of pretty advanced stuff. And the reason that I introduce it here is so that you have something to begin to build on, so that you can move between different songs and see their similarities. A song like Satin Doll uses those same harmonies in the beginning, to the 2-7, to the 2 minor, to the flat 2 dominant. This 2 minor chord here, which then goes to its 5, which is the 5th note of the scale from F, F, G, A, B flat, C. So this is the first chord, 1. The 2 is the G, and the C is the 5. That 2 to 5 relationship is very important in both jazz and in bossa nova harmony. And I want to show you a place where that comes in handy on an introduction that I came up with for Manhã de Carnaval, but also for lots of other songs, where you can start with 2 5s. Okay, now when I say a 2-5, that means I'm talking about a 2 minor chord to a 5 dominant chord. Okay? Sometimes substituting the flat 2 for the 5 is possible, but that's the 2-5 that I'm talking about. I'm going to show you an introduction that starts on A minor, moves to A minor 6, or D7, and then to B minor, to E7. Now these chords are all very similar to the first 2 chords that I showed you of the first example of example 1. Okay? Okay? That looks an awful lot like the first 2 chords that we were using for example 1. But instead of sliding down on the bass note to a half step below, we're going to move it up to the 5th string. So starting on A minor, instead of going down to A flat here, we're going to go to D. And that's that same substitution chord. Okay? So A minor 7 to D7, and then up 2 frets to B minor 7 to E7. Those are exactly the same, they're just 2 frets apart. Okay? Now that's what's commonly known as a vamp. And a vamp is something that you can play again and again and again. You can play it for 10 minutes if you want. Underneath any number of different parts of a song. It can be a solo. Somebody can be playing a melody on top of it. It could be an introduction, which is what I was just talking about. The introduction to a song before the melody comes in. It could be an outro towards the end of a piece when you want to have a long extended section over the same chords again and again. Or it could be just a vamp in and of itself. Sometimes people will just vamp in a band or by themselves for various temporal reasons, for reasons of timing. So this vamp is very useful. And once you learn it, as I said, you can change it to any key you want, and it's going to be very powerful for your playing bossa nova, for introducing different songs, or for other uses. I'll play the introduction, this little vamp, from A minor to A minor 6 to B minor 7 to E7 4 times, and then I will start the melody of Manhã de Carnaval, also known as Black Orpheus or Orfeo Negro. There's a number of songs, there's a number of names for this particular song. But this vamp can be used to start other songs as well. It just happens to work well with this song. It also works with Wave. There's a number of other songs that it works well with. So, 4 times on those 4 chords, very slowly, and then I'll play just the first few notes of the melody so that you get a sense for when the introduction ends. This is an introduction that you can play by itself, and it just sounds very nice and relaxed, and people know right away that you're playing bossa nova. Again, I want you to notice that I'm not using anything different in the rhythm. I'm using either our first example, which is, or the second example, which is the first example, the second example. Okay, here we go. 4 times on the introduction, and then a little bit of melody from Orfeo Negro, or Black Orpheus. Okay, so I want you to feel really comfortable playing this introduction, and I think that your experimentation is going to help you do that. As you noticed, I played around a little bit with the rhythm. I didn't play the rhythm the same way every 2 beats or every 2 bars. I let myself sort of fluctuate between different variations of those 2 first examples of the rhythm. So just experiment with that stuff, and you'll find all kinds of beautiful things that you can do to make it sound just yours and not like something pat. I want to show you one more way of playing this little turnaround that I played at the end there. I called it a turnaround just now. This can definitely be used as a turnaround or an introduction. And I was using it as a turnaround at the end of that melody, before I would start again playing, right? So instead of playing A minor to A minor 6 to B minor 7 to E7 in this way, the B minor 7 to E7 part, I moved the B minor 7 down here, and I kept the bass note, the A, and then I played the E7 that way, which is, those are kind of interesting ways of playing E and B minor 7. But I want you to just notice that although you play those notes, you don't interrupt the harmonic movement at all, and you can do that. So you play the melody, and all I'm doing is I'm moving one note down, 1 fret each time. And what I'm offering you is the opportunity to play the same thing in a couple of different ways. The first way is here. And the other way is this way. So again, 2-5, right? The minor 2 to the dominant 5. Very important relationship for jazz harmony and for Brazilian harmony. So thank you so much for listening. I look forward to hearing from you all. You're free to contact me through homespuntapes.com. I think you can find my email there and contact me through them. I look forward to you asking me any questions that you have. I want to encourage everyone to go out and find their own songs that they love most, both in recordings. Of course, there are a lot of recordings out there of music from the 50s till now for bossa nova, but also sheet music. And I think you'll find that as you find any piece of sheet music and apply what I've shown you here with the jazz harmonies and the extensions, and you see something that says minor, and you make that a minor 7, and you use these voicings that I've shown you, these different voicings, and then you see a 7 chord, and maybe you put a sharp 11 on top, and that kind of thing, substituting a flat 2 for a 5 chord, and that kind of thing. You can create very quickly a bossa nova sound, especially over bossa nova songs that you see on paper. So thanks again for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Good luck.